Welcome to the HR Tech Spotlight Podcast. I'm Deanna Shimoda, CEO of Growth Mode Marketing. The HR technology market is crowded, and we know it can be hard to find the best software solutions for your business in the sea of sameness. On this podcast, we shine a spotlight on some of the best up-and-coming technology options out there. Check it out if you are interested in learning about new innovative solutions available in the market. And if you are with an HR tech company and interested in being considered for a guest spot, stay tuned for details at the end of the show. Hello. In this episode, we are shining a spotlight on Degreed, a learning platform that makes it easy for companies to deliver daily learning, deep skill building, education benefits, real-time insights, and expert services while connecting to a robust network of partners and integrations. Joining me to talk about Degreed is co-founder and CEO, David Blake. Hi, David.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. So let's start out. Tell us about your background in the HR tech space.
I never thought I was going to be in the HR tech space. I never really thought I was going to go into education. If you had asked me when I was 16 what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have said a film director or a politician. But the bug bit for me is I was graduating high school when I sat for my entrance exam. So I sat for the ACT and just was kind of floored, perturbed by the experience, just figured this can't really be how all the grown-ups sort all the 17-year-olds in and out of their future. And that put me on this track. Became really fascinated and passionate about education and how the system works. Early in my career, I started in higher education but really fell in love with this kind of question and problem of signaling our credentials in a world where we're going to be lifelong learners. How do we signal lifelong learning? Tell me about your education. People tell you where they went to university, which is just insufficient in a world of lifelong learning. And so through all of that, started Degreed to be the platform to help people get credit for all of their learning. And in the course of doing that, it led us into our enterprise offering, which brought me to HR and L&D tech. And here I am.
Here you are. So tell us a bit more about what it is Degreed actually does.
Yeah, so you caught just a little bit there in that thread, but the vision for Degreed is we need a way to be able to answer for and get credit for all of our learning and skills. That's the mission, that's the objective. We say to jailbreak the college degree. And so on the platform, you're able to track and get credit for all of your academic credit, all of your academic learning, as well as all of your professional training and development, as well as all of your self-directed and formal learning. So everything, articles, videos, books, podcasts, courses, events, certificates, continuing education, full degrees, coaching, anything you were doing to learn. And so then companies, when we really went into enterprise right around end of 2014, beginning of 2015, and that's in this moment when companies were beginning to appreciate this shift in the world. And as they were looking at their LMS, they're like, oh, the LMS, it does its job well. It's got good reporting. But if I look at what my employees are actually doing in a year to learn and how much of that is flowing through the LMS, it's like 2%. So even if you got a great report, it's a great report on 2% of what your employees learned last year. And so they appreciated they were going to need to have visibility into what people are learning on their own. And so companies started using Degreed to sit on top of their LMS and all of their internal learning. It became known as the LXP, the Learning Experience Platform. And so companies use it to be the holistic front door to all of their learning, the thing that sits on top of and connects their entire L&D and sort of learning stack or technology stack. And it facilitates this broad-based, holistic learning experience and learning culture across your organization.
That's pretty cool because I do think, for a lot of people, in the corporate world, many of us have gone and we've gotten the traditional college degree, but there is so much more to life and learning than sitting in a classroom, right? And you think about, some of the successful people out there, they're really smart, they've learned a lot, but they did it in non-traditional ways, or they got out of college and they continued to learn. And People deserve to have that acknowledged by the companies that they're working for, because all of that learning is making them, better qualified to do their jobs, right? And to do the next level.
Yeah. Here's a just fascinating stat, which is even amongst college graduates, and even amongst all of the audio content that we listen to today, and even amongst all of the new age content and like course providers, so LinkedIn Learning and Coursera and Masterclass, even amongst all of that, on average, you will still learn more from books than any other source. In your lifetime, you will learn more from authors than you will from professors and or teachers. And like when you just step back and appreciate, like, you know not good, bad, or otherwise, but it's just the reality. We've got this college degree to answer for that learning, but you actually learned more over here from all the books you've read on average. And yet, you really can't answer for that or transact on that in your career in the same way. And that's always just been sort of you know, the world needs a better solution, needs a better answer. So that's always been the ambition
Yeah.
and hope of Degree.
That's so interesting. I am an avid reader myself, but I've never stopped and thought about the fact that I've probably read a lot more books now. Not all of them are educational, but
Sure. No?
then I have sat in front of a professor and listened to them talk.
So that's our goal. We want everyone to get credit for all of their learning, irrespective of how or where you learned it. And to the extent we can make that true in the world's a better place, because it shouldn't matter what sort of logo you have on a
Hmm.
credential. It should matter what skills you have, what knowledge you obtained, not where you obtained it. And yeah, it's just that's a better world.
Yeah, I agree. In thinking of the context of learning and employers, what would you say is a big challenge or problem that you see facing HR departments and organizations that really Degreed helps solve for?
Sure. I mean, if you step back and frame this from, let's look at the CEO's biggest, most pressing problems. So PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, they've done their annual CEO survey for, I think it's going on like 30 plus years now. They've just consistently every year they send out this survey. Now, COVID radically shifted that all of a sudden. But you see climbing over the last decade, this CEO level concern of not having all of the skills that the organization needs to capture all of the opportunity in front of the organization. And it now was bouncing around about the third highest CEO level concern. That's a big deal. So CEOs are worried we don't have the right skills to meet our moment in our industry, to capture sort of everything. So that skills gap is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's getting more and more pressing. And so, what do we all need to mobilize around? HR, L&D, we help meet the business needs. Well, increasingly, as the skill gaps gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the organizations that get good at building skill, measuring skill, mobilizing based on skill, those that get good at this kind of skills orientation are capturing meaningful advantage, and those who aren't are starting to get left behind. And that's of real consequence. And there's now research out of McKinsey, out of Deloitte, out of the World Economic Forum that does show the quantifiable advantage of this kind of skills orientation. So, I think that's going to be a defining characteristic of great HR and L&D versus kind of legacy HR and legacy L&D, is whether or not you get good at the skills orientation.
Hmm. So I know, David, that you know that learning and development, that category in HR tech is very crowded. What is it that makes Degreed unique from the other options that are out there?
Yeah, so we created our own category of software and what we do. So historically, there was the LMS, and now we've created a net new category called the LXP. So we created it, we lead it, we acquired the second largest competitor in the space, and the third largest competitor is much smaller still. So we really created this new category. What distinguishes it? What's different? So the LMS, that's really where you do your like regulatory and compliance driven learning. So that's learning that is typically helping the company, stay in compliance, helping the company meet regulatory needs, where Degreed in the LXP is really about learning that helps the employee. So what are your employees' goals? What is your employee interested in? And how do you help meet those needs? So you can just distinguish it that way. Kind of there's other nuances to point to, but Degreed is really about empowering the individual, upskilling the individual, helping the individual navigate in the organization and in their career. It's helping the individual unlock opportunities based on that education, knowledge, and skill. It's really all about the individual.
And what type of companies would you say are the perfect fit for Degreed?
Yeah. We now serve a third of the employees across the Fortune 100. So our clients tend to be some of the world's largest, most complex multinational organizations. And I think the reason why it's caught on there first is because for a couple of reasons. One, they're often just have the most learning systems and content. And so having this unifying thing that creates a great experience for the employee was most needed there. I think one of the other reasons is because they are who is feeling the pressure of the skills gap most. And so it has caused them to mobilize first. So companies, we serve a lot of companies. So like NASA, JPL to Citibank to Bank of America to Visa to MasterCard to Unilever to manufacturing companies like Cemex and pharmaceutical companies. We serve companies of all industries, but those that are feeling the skills gap most is who has mobilized to Degreed first.
Tell us some stories about the experiences those clients have had. What kind of ROI and takeaways are they getting from working with Degreed?
Happy to. I actually don't know, where do you live? That question betrayed a bit of a Midwestern, possibly Canadian accent. But where in the world are you?
I am in Minnesota, but I have been accused
Minnesota.
of being Canadian before. Yeah, hey,
Yeah. I love it. I lived in Ontario, Canada for a good stretch, and
Okay.
your about was very nice. But Minnesota makes sense. Yeah, so I mean, let me talk about some client stories. So we're working right now with Wells Fargo, and this is a team of people that we've actually worked with historically before they all came to Wells Fargo. But they were brought to Wells Fargo to really reinvigorate and reimagine and leapfrog what the employee experience can be at Wells Fargo. And so to do that, one of the framings that I take when I work with companies is this kind of small arc, mediums arc, and big arcs. So what are you doing daily and weekly? What are you doing quarterly and semi-annually? As well as the big arcs is like, what are you doing to help people get ready for their next job? What are you doing to help people on a 5-year, career arc? And that framing came from the world of game design, where there's actually this framework in game design where your game has to have good second by second, minute by minute interactions. It has to have good medium size, like world leveling systems, and it has to have big, good long arcs, which is like the story arc. And whichever in game design, they look at where do you lose players. It's kind of the weakest link in the chain is where your game's going to break. And so they look at where they lose players. And it might be, at minute 27 is where we lose the most amount of players. Or it honestly might be at hour 47 or on week 70. I mean, some of these game franchises are decades old now, World of Warcraft and whatnot, and Fortnite. And that might be we lose players at year 4. Well, if you think of HR, if you think of L&D as like this game, And where are you losing your players? Where are they disengaging? Where are they actually leaving and getting another job? And so just like in game design, you can look at HR that way. You can look at it through this frame and say, oh, here is where we are losing our players. Here's where we're losing the engagement of our employees. And when you look at HR that way, typically what you will find is that HR and L&D, by the natural course of what they do, tend to be very good at medium-sized arcs. A lot of HR and L&D programs are medium-sized arcs. Quarterly training, semi-annual leadership development, medium-sized arcs. And so where we step in and have been able to help organizations the most is in the small arcs and in the long arcs. So what does that look like for Wells Fargo? Well, getting this culture of daily learning right in the flow of work. When you are just at your desk working on something, at your fingertips, how do you have resources that help keep you sharp, keep you unstuck, help inform a question that you have? You got to get good at that. And then the medium-sized arcs in the employee journey, that's a lot of the conferences, trainings, development, the stuff actually that most organizations tend to already have in place. But then how do you get good at the big stuff? And that's where we're helping kind of the most innovative organizations right now, which is around like their education benefits. So tuition assistance, tuition reimbursement, this is kind of a big expenditure. It historically has only been used by frontline employees who didn't have their college degrees to go get online degrees. It's used by some to get advanced degrees. But we're helping organizations to reimagine that, to say, what are the possibilities? What are the skills that you need inside of Wells Fargo? And rather than sending people off to get full degrees, how can you use that education benefit to invest in your employees to meet the needs that the organization has? And this is huge right now. One of the things we're seeing, last thing I'll say just on this thread is, especially amongst younger generations, the employees, like often Gen Z millennials will opt for employee development over a $10,000 raise. So when it's phrased that way in employee surveys, they will value higher development and skill development in my career than they will actual compensation. So we know getting this part right has a huge sort of leverage in the organization to help you meet strategic needs, but also to help you just engage and retain your employees. So the small, the medium, the long arcs, if you can get all of that right, you've got a great game. And the Wells Fargo, I love that they're pushing on all three fronts right now.
Very cool. So what is the future vision for Degreed?
Yeah, we've been talking about this future for a long time where instead of the world transacting on where you went to college, what degree that you have, that we're in a world where we're transacting on your skills. And so that's been the vision, and it's coming alive right now because in large part AI is unlocking enough of the technology to kind of make it real. So the same way that a decade ago when Degreed was born, it was born in this moment of like content was exploding, lifelong learning was exploding, it was becoming the norm. And now what we're seeing is this skills data is exploding. So Degreed built this layer, the LXP, that sat on top of all of your learning, all modalities, platforms, providers, academic, professional, and formal. And now we want to do the same thing for skills. So anywhere that there is skill data on you, so increasingly that might be, yes, learning platforms, but that also might be in HR or payroll systems, that might be in performance systems. We want to connect all of those so that you can have one unified skill profile inside the organization and across your career. And when people ask you, tell me about your education, instead of answering with where you went to college, what degree you have, or if you don't have a college degree, that you'll be able to answer with a quantified, verified, profile of your skills.
What is the biggest hesitation that you see companies have when they're looking at a solution like Degreed? And what would you tell them?
Yeah, what tends to be the break point is this mindset of, there's kind of, so are we doing this to the company's good? Are we doing this to the employees good? And the companies that are willing to take that leap, take that step. There's the old training of like, well, what if we train our employees and they leave? Well, what if you don't and they stay? It's perhaps cliche or trite, but it is a good break point, because often when Degreed is selling into organizations, it's sort of do nothing. Is what we tend to, when people don't engage with Degreed, it's not because they're going somewhere else, it's because they tend to do nothing. The organizations that are leaning in, that are seeing, okay, we've got to invest daily, weekly, monthly in the development of our people. We can't do that with the old systems and in the old ways. We can't come up with a program every time someone needs to learn something. We have to have this agile, continuous way of empowering our employees to get the learning they need. That mind shift, companies that make it, that's Degreed's clientele, those who are still, do we have to, or what is the sort of minimum amount required to check the box? That'll keep you with your LMS, because that's what the LMS is there for, is to keep you in compliance. And then they tend to just try and sweat that asset, if you will, to try and get the most learning they can out of it. But I think we can all appreciate these days, when you need to learn something, rarely do you log into your LMS. You typically go to Google, you go to the web, you find your answer. And that's just the reality of the world we're in.
Yeah. So we are up on time here. What final thoughts do you want to leave our audience with?
We can have a discussion about how long it's going to take, but as I look into the future, I really see a world where, instead of organizing our careers and our companies on jobs and job roles and job descriptions, that we're going to get to this more nuanced, more sophisticated world where we're organizing it based on people's skills, the skills required to do the work, the skills that people have. And that is going to create a more efficient and effective organization. And I think the bellwether of this, or like, as we get in the future and look back, like many of the organizations listening to this podcast today are going to have dozens, hundreds, and some of them maybe thousands of people in the same job role getting paid the same thing. And like 5-7 years from now, we're going to look back on that and think that was crazy. Like, of course, like that's silly. Like, we're paying these 3,000 people the same thing. Like, of course, those 3,000 people don't all have the exact same skill, but we just didn't have a more sophisticated, canonized way of organizing it all and measuring it all. So that future is coming. It's going to look, I think, dramatically different. It's going to be better. And, very excited. And if we can be a resource to anyone who's interested in exploring what that future looks like, feel free to reach out and connect.
Yeah. So that leads me to my last question. Where can our listeners go to learn more about Degreed?
Yeah. My email is david@degreed.com. So feel free to reach out to me personally. The website, of course, degreed.com. Or you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Pretty easy.
You're going to have every marketer out there listening to the show emailing, or I should say sales rep, not marketer.
I would welcome it. Yep.
So. All right, great. Thanks, David. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HR Tech Spotlight Podcast, where we showcase some of the best up-and-coming HR technology options in the market. If you are an HR tech company leader who would like to be considered for a guest spot on this program, please contact me via growthmodemarketing.com or reach out to me, Deanna Shimoda, on LinkedIn. And if you found this show informative, subscribe, connect with us on social media, and leave a review. This is Deanna with Growth Mode Marketing signing off. Thanks for listening. We hope you'll tune in again next time.